Hey, everybody. All right. So continuing on with our discussion of supplementing our competitive strategy, right? Moving beyond just this, you know, kind of two by two dichotomy of are we cost leaders? Are we differentiators? We're talking more about some of these other activities we engage in right now, right? That are important strategic choices in their own right, but maybe are not just about this generic competitive strategy that we started off by talking about when we were going over chapter 5. So we started off by discussing what really does it mean to have an offensive strategic approach last time, right? Searching out, trying to utilize and figure out ways where we can gain competitive advantage by being on the offensive. Well, we understand if we were talking about the offensive, it's likely we've got to address what it means also to employ a defensive strategy. So a defensive strategic approach here really just aims at exactly what it says here. We are trying to protect ourselves, defend ourselves from situations that might be, costly or unflattering for us, right? We might find ourselves in a situation where we're at a very high risk now of being attacked by some rival of ours. There are people who are positioning themselves well to, take advantage of some situation of ours or try to like cut into our market space. All of a sudden, maybe something that in the past was a definite advantage of ours where we had some valuable access to some resource or we had some unique capability. And now all of a sudden, it's going to be easily imitated. There's been some technological advancement or some sort of thing where now maybe the advantage that we have enjoyed for a while isn't quite as much of an advantage for us, right? Or, there may be a situation where we just we're not feeling good about the future and we're just kind of like, maybe it's not the time to be risky with our behavior and be offensive about things. It's time to kind of defend and protect ourselves a little bit more. In those situations, we want to, like it says here, send signals to our rivals that if they attack us, we're likely to retaliate. We're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, but just remember we said earlier, when we first started talking about offensive strategic approaches, is a good defensive strategy helps us protect our competitive advantage, but it is rarely going to be our basis for creating it. So if we get into this discussion about our complementary approaches, just remember that offensive approach, the offensive strategy, that's really where we build and establish competitive advantage. And defensive strategic approaches are going to be where we protect that competitive advantage that we've established. But that defensive strategic approach, it's not going to be where we create that competitive advantage through these behaviors. This isn't where we create it. So we say that a lot of the time. What's interesting, I have a really good friend that does research in this area, and he looks at earnings calls, or he'll analyze information like letters to shareholders and things like that brought out by companies. And a lot of times there's a lot of strategic jargon to these that are trying to signal something to other people without explicitly saying it. So we've actually found that a lot of the times when we're running companies, some of the time just sending some signal out there that suggests that we will retaliate if others are offensive against us is all that we need, actually, a lot of the time. So we can do this a lot of like subtle ways. We've found that, like making public announcements in, press conferences, in letters to shareholders, or things like that, where we emphasize over and over, we are strongly committed to maintaining our market share. We are deeply committed to our customers. We will, be deeply committed no matter what it takes. We will protect, our market share, things like that other people might say, maybe this is a company that's not necessarily going down without a fight kind of idea. One of the other things that we can signal to people is by what we call, strengthening our war chest, right? Making sure that we have a strong reserve of resources like cash or marketable securities. You see this like crazy with Apple, right? In the news forever, it was just, oh my gosh, how much cash is Apple going to hoard over time? And it was one reason why it's like people don't mess around with them, is because they can weather the storm. Whatever you throw at them, they don't have to be profitable through it. They have tons of cash at their disposal. So therefore, they're like, yeah, go ahead, bring whatever it is on, but I'll bet we got enough resources to outlast you, whatever it is you do, kind of thing. And some of the time, it's just about making these counter responses, or to moves that are made by our weaker rivals or things like that. They may do something, we may match it, we may throw some signal out there in the world that's like, hey, we're not just going to lay down and take it if you start throwing offensive efforts our way. So a lot of the time, it's just about signaling that we will retaliate, not necessarily even having to do too much legitimate retaliation. So as you're working with your BSG team this semester, just keep some of these kind of ideas in mind about how you can be on the defensive if that's really where you've got to be at this point. Because the big question you got to continue to think about, remember, with your simulation group, which rivals have competitive weaknesses your company can take advantage of, or same type of idea, where are my competitive weaknesses that others might try to take advantage of, and how can we safeguard against those types of attacks, right? I understand you have limited ability to do some of those things using the simulation platform, but just understanding it is every bit as important. Like when we talked about that SWOT analysis recently, understanding your competitive weaknesses is every bit as important as understanding your strengths. So being on the defensive, understanding where we can safeguard against those kinds of things can be extremely important for us and our success as a business.